This podcast is an issue of Cut Daily, read by AI-generated voices created by 11labs.io. Sign up for free at cut-daily.com to receive a concise post-production insight direct to your inbox every Friday morning.
Last year, the most popular video on my humble YouTube channel was this documentary masterclass from veteran documentary editor Steve Audette.
No matter how much research you do your research, you have to have your journalistic chops up front. You have to have that. But if you have that, the story is always going to come from the footage. Always.
If you've not seen it before, it's well worth a watch, regardless of the kind of editing you currently do, as it delivers a fascinating breakdown of the editorial process when crafting a scene for a frontline PBS documentary, with a ton of valuable insights peppered in along the way. After 30 years in the edit suite, these days, Steve can be found sailing the east coast of the US, but often consults as an edit doctor or joins a team as a supervising editor to help leverage his years of expertise on multiple projects. In today's issue of Cut Daily, I wanted to share a short essay Steve wrote on an interesting narrative archetype, Percival's uncle. It's a fascinating concept to keep in the back of your mind as you edit, in order to keep your audience focused and on track as they navigate a nuanced narrative. But I also often think of myself, the editor, as this same person, this Percival's uncle. How can my voice, when filtered through the editorial choices I make, be trusted with the wisdom to surmise the data and help the viewer separate the wheat from the chaff? Most importantly, to do so with grace and without prejudice. I asked Steve for a concrete example of a Percival's uncle in recent popular media. Here's what he wrote back.
I racked my brain trying to think of an iconic actor everyone might know who has played the part of Percival's uncle. Then, I woke up late last night and it hit me. Tim Gunn of Project Runway and Making the Cut fame. He plays the part perfectly.
What follows is Steve's unedited short essay, Percival's Uncle.
In my early years cutting documentary, I discovered Percival's uncle and the value his archetype could bring to storytelling. In history, Percival's uncle is a narrative foil from the Dark Ages, made famous by an Arthurian series of romantic stories from the 12th century by Chrétien de Troyes. Percival's uncle was specifically created to help explain the mysteries and metaphysics inherent in Percival's heroic quests for the Holy Grail. We will save the meaning of that quest for another eventide meditation. Percival's uncle would appear in the stories as a hermit living in a cave, or as an impoverished but wise holy man, or sometimes as a magi sage, but would always be described as a distant relative, sometimes with Percival's knowledge, but not always. His presence would interrupt the protagonist's quest for the Grail with big-picture knowledge, wisdom, or a greater understanding, and, with a knowing voice, connect the dots and help Percival and the reader with story context. Why this or that part of the previous scene is important to remember going forward in the narrative. The hermit always was a gentle, non-biased guiding light, pointing a path forward. While at frontline PBS, this voice was also called the wise man or woman, but this is an ancient narrative foil. As mentioned above, Percival's uncle is a trusted voice in a confusing sea of points of view or opinion. They are an experienced hand the viewer can hold on to as the film explores a subject or narrative that is complicated and or nuanced. A voice that has the wisdom to surmise the data and help the viewer separate the wheat from the chaff, most importantly to do so with grace and without prejudice. Documentaries today tend to be advocacy declarations, an argument of a presented side or cause. I'm not a big fan of these films because in its truest form, a documentary is a quest for the grail of truth in a very complex world. A well-told documentary should be a complicated narrative and not black and white. A narrative filled with many convincing persuasions and nuances battling for the hearts and minds of the viewer. A narrative without true, righteous conflict, without compelling, conflicting content equal to the solemn knights who search for the Grail, is not a story at all. It is only a proclamation. Percival's uncle helps wade through conflict narrative by providing the all-important context of these opinions, positions, without prejudice, and without a thumb on the scale. Think about Percival in your next film, and let me know how it affects your work. Steve Audette.
So remember, Percival's uncle, and Cut Daily.
This podcast is an issue of Cut Daily, Read by AI-generated voices created by 11labs.io. Sign up for free at cut-daily.com to receive a concise post-production insight direct to your inbox every Friday morning.